I've always believed that money talks, but kindness whispers. Standing at the gift table that Saturday afternoon, I held an envelope containing $1,000. The reception hall buzzed with pre-ceremony energy. Guests mingled, checking seating charts, admiring the floral arrangements I'd secretly paid for just 3 weeks earlier. Victoria stood near the gift table with her bridesmaids, Ashley and Brittany. Her blonde hair caught the light streaming through the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows. I approached with a smile, genuinely happy for my brother David. This was his day, the culmination of months of planning and dreaming. "Congratulations, Victoria," I said, extending the envelope. "I'm so excited to officially welcome you to the family." She accepted it with manicured fingers, her blue eyes bright with anticipation. The envelope felt substantial in her hands, heavier than a simple card. Victoria opened the envelope with practiced elegance, the kind she'd perfected for every gift opening occasion. Her eyes scanned the check inside. $1,000, more than I'd ever given as a wedding gift before. More than most people would consider appropriate for anyone outside immediate family. Her expression shifted subtly, a micro-expression that I almost missed, but didn't. She leaned toward Ashley and Brittany, her voice dropping to what she thought was a private whisper. But I was still standing right there. "Seriously? 1,000? That's cute." The word cute dripped with condescension, like she was describing a child's drawing. The bridesmaids giggled on cue, their laughter sharp and knowing. They glanced at me with poorly concealed smirks. My smile remained frozen on my face, a mask hiding the shock rippling through me. The ambient noise of the reception hall seemed to fade. I managed a polite nod and stepped away, my heart pounding. No one else had heard, no witnesses to defend me or validate what just happened. The casual cruelty of it stunned me more than the words themselves. This woman was about to become my sister-in-law. Victoria had no idea what she was mocking. She couldn't know that her cute $1,000 gift was just the tip of an iceberg. She didn't know about the $28,000 I'd quietly funneled into this wedding over the past 4 months. Every vendor payment, every upgrade, every last-minute addition. The very venue where she stood dismissing my generosity had been secured with my credit card when David's financing fell through. It started 6 months ago when David came to my apartment, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by quiet desperation. He sat on my couch, running his hands through his wavy brown hair. "Elena, I don't know what to do," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria wants this amazing wedding, and I want to give it to her. But..." His words trailed off, but I understood. David worked as a junior accountant, barely making ends meet after student loan payments. "How much do you need?" I asked, already reaching for my checkbook. David was more than my younger brother. He was my closest friend. "I can't ask you to do that," he protested, but his eyes showed desperate hope. "It's too much. The venue alone is $15,000. I thought about my successful marketing consultancy, the clients I'd worked years to build, the comfortable life I'd created for myself. "You're not asking," I said firmly. "I'm offering. Let me do this for you, David. You'd do the same for me." The release that flooded his face was worth every penny I would spend. He hugged me tight, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll pay you back, I promise. Every cent, with interest." But we both knew his entry-level salary made that impossible anytime soon. The venue deposit was due the next week. $15,000 to secure the elegant ballroom Victoria had fallen in love with during their venue tour. I called the coordinator directly, providing my credit card information and asking them to list David as the primary contact for all future communications. "This is incredibly generous," the coordinator said. "Your brother is lucky to have family like you." Over the following months, the expenses mounted. The catering upgrade Victoria insisted upon. The photographer, whose portfolio made her eyes light up with joy. Each payment I made from my own accounts. Each vendor conversation I had privately before David's meetings, smoothing the way financially while staying invisible. The DJ with the premium sound system, the floral arrangements that transformed the space into something from a fairy tale. Victoria's vision kept expanding. The bar package needed to be premium. The cake required 3 additional tiers. The tent extension became necessary when more guests RSVP'd than expected. Each edition came with David's apologetic phone calls. "Elena, I know I'm asking too much." But I could hear Victoria in the background, discussing details with infectious excitement. "It's fine," I assured him every time. "I want her to have the wedding she dreams about." The photography package upgrade happened 3 weeks before the wedding. Victoria had seen another photographer's work and fallen in love with their style. "The difference is only $3,000, David explained, his voice tight with stress. "But Elena, I can't ask you for more." "You're not asking," I reminded him, already calculating how to shift funds around. "This is my gift to both of you." 2 weeks before the wedding, emergency expenses arose. The original linens were damaged in shipping. The backup generator rental became necessary when weather forecasts showed possible storms. Each crisis I handled quietly. Each solution I funded without fanfare or expectation of recognition. Victoria sailed through these crises unaware, assuming someone else was managing the details. That someone was always me. Throughout the planning process, Victoria held court at family gatherings, regaling everyone with stories of her wedding preparations, her organizational skills, her eye for detail, her budget management. "I'm really good at stretching a dollar," she'd say with false modesty. "We're getting so much value for our money." She never mentioned David's financial constraints or the mysterious way bills kept getting paid ahead of schedule. Victoria crafted an elaborate story about her parents' contributions and her own savings funding the lavish celebration. She spoke with authority about vendor negotiations and budget allocations. "My parents have been so generous," she'd tell anyone who'd listen, "and I've been saving for this day since I was little." Every word stung, but I said nothing. This wasn't about recognition. It was about David's happiness. My brother, meanwhile, showered me with appreciation. He understood exactly what I was doing and why, even if we never spoke about specific amounts. "I don't deserve a sister like you," he'd say, hugging me after each crisis I'd quietly resolved. "You deserve happiness," I'd reply. "That's all I want for you." The final week before the wedding brought a flurry of activity. Last-minute alterations, final headcounts, weather contingency plans, everything I'd paid for coming together. Victoria glowed with pre-wedding excitement, posting constant social media updates about her dream wedding and her perfect planning skills. David grew more nervous and sentimental, frequently thanking me for everything while trying not to overwhelm me with gratitude. I shopped for my outfit carefully, wanting to look appropriate for such an elegant affair. The dress I chose was simple but beautiful, purchased from the same boutique where Victoria bought her bridesmaids' gifts. I selected jewelry that would complement without competing, shoes that would be comfortable for the long day ahead. Every detail considered. The envelope containing my $1,000 check, I prepared the night before, writing a heartfelt note inside about welcoming Victoria to our family. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful, the weather concerns that had necessitated the backup generator rental proving unfounded. I arrived early to help with any last-minute needs. The venue looked spectacular. Every detail I'd funded had come together perfectly, creating the fairy tale wedding Victoria had envisioned from the beginning. David paced nervously in the groom's suite, adjusting his tie repeatedly while his groomsmen tried to calm his pre-ceremony jitters. The gift table stood elegant and organized near the reception hall entrance, decorated with the same flowers that adorned every other surface. My floral budget had been generous. Other guests had already deposited their gifts, creating an impressive display of boxes and envelopes. I noticed the expensive wrapping paper, the thoughtful presentations. My own envelope, simple but substantial, would blend seamlessly with the others. Just another wedding gift from just another guest. I approached the gift table around 3 o'clock, 2 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The timing felt right, casual, but not rushed. Victoria stood there with Ashley and Brittany, the three of them dressed in matching robes, their hair and makeup professionally done. Another expense I'd quietly covered. They were laughing about something, their voices bright and carefree. The joy of a bride surrounded by her closest friends on her wedding day. "Victoria," I called softly, not wanting to interrupt their moment too abruptly. She turned toward me with genuine warmth, her smile radiant. "Elena, you look beautiful," she said, and for a moment I felt hopeful about our future relationship. Perhaps I'd misjudged her before. I handed her the envelope, my heart full of love for David and cautious optimism about welcoming her into our family. She accepted the envelope gracefully, her fingers immediately assessing its weight and thickness, the practiced gesture of someone accustomed to receiving gifts. Her opening technique was elegant, careful not to tear the expensive paper I'd chosen. Inside, my handwritten note accompanied the substantial check. The amount was clearly visible, $1,000, written in my careful script, signed with love from her future sister-in-law. Her expression changed so subtly that only someone watching closely would notice. A slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible shift in her smile. She glanced at the check again, as if confirming the amount, then looked back at me with what I initially mistook for surprise. "Thank you so much," she said, the voice maintaining its warm tone, while something cooler flickered in her blue eyes. As I began to step away, giving them space to continue their pre-ceremony preparations, Victoria leaned toward her bridesmaids. Her voice dropped to what she assumed was a private whisper. "Seriously? 1,000? That's cute." The word hung in the air like a slap, casual and cutting simultaneously. Ashley and Brittany's giggles followed immediately, perfectly timed and equally cruel. Their eyes flicked toward me with barely concealed amusement. I stood frozen, my polite smile still plastered on my face, while my heart hammered against my ribs. The casual cruelty of it stunned me more than anger. No one else had heard, no witnesses to validate what just happened or defend my generosity. Just me, absorbing the casual dismissal of my gift. I managed a slight nod and moved away, my legs carrying me automatically while my mind reeled from the unexpected attack. Walking through the reception hall, surrounded by all the beauty I'd secretly funded, Victoria's words echoed in my mind. Cute, like my $1,000 was pocket change. She had no idea that her cute gift represented just a fraction of my contribution to her dream wedding. No idea that every flower she admired, I'd paid for. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so personally painful. She was mocking the generosity that made her perfect day possible. I found David in the groom's suite, his nervous energy evident as he checked his appearance in the mirror for the 100th time. His face lit up when he saw me. "Elena, how are you feeling? Ready for me to officially make Victoria your sister?" His joy was infectious, his love for his bride evident in every word. "I'm so happy for you," I said, pushing aside Victoria's cruelty. This day was about David's happiness, not my hurt feelings. Throughout the pre-ceremony activities, I maintained my composure, greeting other guests, admiring the decorations, complimenting the bride when our paths crossed again. Victoria seemed to have forgotten her comment entirely, chatting with me warmly about the weather and how perfect everything looked. Her ability to compartmentalize was remarkable. I smiled and nodded and played my role as the supportive future sister-in-law, while inside, her words continued to sting. Sarah Chen, the quietest of Victoria's bridesmaids, lingered near me during the cocktail hour. Her dark eyes seemed more observant than her friends, her demeanor more thoughtful. "You seem upset," she said quietly, her voice kind. Are you okay? Just pre-ceremony nerves, I replied, not wanting to burden her with the truth. She was Victoria's friend, after all. As guests took their seats for the ceremony, I found my place in the front row, designated for immediate family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sitting in the family section, having funded the family's greatest celebration, while being privately mocked by the woman becoming part of that family. The weight of carrying this secret felt heavier with each passing moment. The processional music began, filling the space with elegant notes. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle I'd helped pay to decorate, their dresses rustling softly. David stood at the altar, his face radiant with joy and nervous anticipation. This was his moment, his dream coming true. Then the bridal march began, and Victoria appeared at the back of the aisle, resplendent in her designer gown. Victoria looked absolutely stunning as she walked toward David, her dress trailing behind her like something from a fairy tale. The photographer I'd secretly hired captured every step. The guests rose in unison, their collective intake of breath audible in a sudden silence. She was a vision of bridal perfection. David's face showed pure love and awe as he watched his bride approach. This was what I'd wanted for him, what made every sacrifice worthwhile. But then, something unexpected happened. Victoria reached the altar, took her place beside David, but something in his expression seemed different. Strained, the officiant, Reverend Johnson, began the traditional words, his voice carrying clearly through the space. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I noticed David's hands trembling slightly, his usual composure showing cracks that only someone who knew him well would detect. "Do you, David Martinez, take Victoria Ashworth to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Reverend Johnson's voice was warm and ceremonial. The congregation held its collective breath, waiting for the traditional "I do" that would bind them together. But instead, David's voice cracked as he said, "Stop." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. 200 guests sat frozen, unsure if they'd heard correctly. Victoria's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "David," she whispered, confusion and fear mixing in her voice. Reverend Johnson looked between them uncertainly, his years of experience having never prepared him for this exact moment. David's voice grew stronger, carrying clearly through the silent space. "Yesterday evening, I learned something that I can't ignore." He looked directly at Victoria, his brown eyes filled with pain and disappointment. "I learned how you spoke about my sister, Elena." Victoria's face went from pale to ashen, her blue eyes darting toward me in the front row with something approaching panic. "The sister who quietly paid for this entire wedding," David continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. "Every flower, every plate of food, every photograph being taken right now." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Chairs creaked as guests shifted, trying to process what they were hearing. Victoria's bouquet trembled in her hands, the flowers I'd inadvertently purchased for her to carry while she mocked my generosity. David's voice carried a finality that made my heart break for him, even as I felt vindicated. "If you can mock the hand that made this day possible, I cannot marry you." The silence stretched endlessly. Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out, the carefully crafted composure finally cracking completely. "My answer is no," David said clearly, removing the ring from his finger and placing it gently on the altar. Chaos erupted instantly. Victoria's mother, Margaret Ashworth, shrieked from her seat in the front row. "This is insane! You can't do this!" Victoria found her voice at last, pointing an accusing finger at me. "This is your fault. You poisoned him against me." Guests murmured and whispered, some standing to get a better view of the unprecedented drama unfolding at the altar. But then Sarah Chen stepped forward, her quiet voice somehow cutting through the chaos. "No, Victoria. Elena didn't say anything to anyone." She looked around the congregation, her dark eyes steady and brave. "I told David what you said about his sister's gift." Victoria whirled toward her bridesmaid, betrayal and fury warring in her expression. You had no right. I had every right, Sarah replied calmly. Someone needed to tell him who he was really marrying. She turned toward David with genuine sympathy. I'm sorry it had to be today, but I couldn't let you marry someone without knowing how she really feels about your family. The weight of truth settled over the ceremony space like a heavy blanket, undeniable and transformative. David stepped down from the altar, his wedding suit somehow still immaculate despite the emotional devastation he'd just unleashed. His steps were measured, deliberate. He walked past the stunned officiant, past Victoria, who stood frozen in her designer gown, past the elaborate decorations that had cost so much. Every eye in the room followed him as he made his way down the aisle toward me. When David reached my row, his brown eyes were bright with unshed tears. His voice cracked as he spoke, barely loud enough for me to hear. Elena, I am so sorry. I didn't know who I was marrying, but I know who my real family is. He pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home, his arms wrapping around me with desperate gratitude and love. Around us, the wedding guests continued to murmur and stare, but in that moment, it was just us. Victoria's sobs filled the space where wedding vows should have been spoken. Her perfectly styled hair began to come undone as she clutched her bouquet. Margaret Ashworth was still shouting, demanding explanations and threatening lawsuits, while Victoria's father tried unsuccessfully to calm his wife. The wedding party stood in various states of shock, unsure whether to comfort the bride or simply leave. Sarah Chen appeared beside us, her expression calm despite the chaos she'd helped create. I'm sorry it happened this way, she said quietly. Thank you, I replied, meaning it completely. That took real courage. She nodded slightly. Someone had to care more about the truth than about keeping the peace. Gradually, guests began to leave. Some approached us with quiet words of support. Others simply slipped out, unwilling to get involved in the family drama. The vendors continued their work professionally, unsure whether to pack up the reception or wait for instructions that weren't coming. Victoria's inner circle gathered around her, but even they seemed uncertain about how to handle the unprecedented situation. Eventually, the ceremony space emptied, except for immediate family and a few close friends. The elaborate decorations stood as monuments to dreams that would never be fulfilled. David and I remained near the altar, neither of us quite ready to leave the space where everything had changed so dramatically. What happens now? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. David looked around at all the beauty that had been prepared for his wedding day, all the details that had cost so much more than money. Now we go home, he said simply, and we figure out what comes next. He took my hand, his grip steady and warm. Together. We drove to my apartment in comfortable silence, both still wearing our wedding attire, both processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. David sat heavily on my couch, the same couch where he'd first asked for help with the wedding that had just spectacularly imploded. I ordered Chinese takeout and opened a bottle of wine, unsure what else to do with the evening that had been planned so differently. Do you regret it? I asked as we sat with our takeout containers, still dressed for a celebration that never happened. David considered the question seriously, his brown eyes thoughtful. I regret that it took so long to see who she really was. He paused, twirling lo mein around his chopsticks, but I don't regret stopping the wedding. I'm sorry about all the money, David said quietly. $28,000 for nothing. Not so nothing, I corrected him. It wasn't wasted if it helped you see the truth before it was too late. The money had served its purpose, just not in the way any of us had expected. How did I miss it? David asked, more to himself than to me. How did I not see how she treated people? Love makes us blind sometimes, I said gently. You saw what you wanted to see, what you hoped was there. But you saw the truth, he replied. And you never said anything. ... It wasn't my place, I said. The part of me wondered if I should have spoken up sooner. I wanted to be wrong about her. You weren't wrong, David said, with finality. And I'm grateful Sarah had the courage to tell me what you wouldn't. We sat in comfortable silence, processing the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. What will you do now? I asked, genuinely curious about how someone rebuilds after such a public, emotional devastation. David smiled ruefully. Learn to trust my instincts better, and maybe take some time to figure out what I really want in a partner. He looked at me with deep affection. And find a way to pay back my sister, who sacrificed so much for my happiness. You don't owe me anything, I said firmly. Family doesn't keep score. Maybe not, David replied, but family also doesn't let family go unappreciated. He hugged me again, and in that embrace, I felt the certainty that we'd both learned something valuable from this painful experience. 6 months later, David had moved into his own place and started therapy to understand how he'd ignored so many red flags. He seemed lighter, more himself again. I never heard from Victoria again, though Sarah and I became unlikely friends. She'd found a new group of friends who valued honesty over social harmony. The money was never repaid and never mentioned again. Some investments returned dividends in ways you never expect.